Hello and welcome. Today we'll talk about Jacob. Jacob's story is found in the book of Genesis, chapters 25 through 49, followed by the last chapter of the book of Genesis. Jacob's life can be viewed as the historical narrative and through typology. We will consider two types: Jacob as a picture of a believer, and Jacob as the type of the Jewish nation. It is interesting to note that each of the patriarchs foreshadows distinct truth in the life of a believer. In the story of Abraham, we see the life of faith. In the story of Isaac, we observe the life of submission. In the story of Jacob, we witness a life of conflict. God's sovereignty is expressed through Abraham's call. The new supernatural birth is manifested through the birth of Isaac. And in Jacob, we see the manifestation of the two natures of a believer, the physical nature and the spiritual nature. Today, we will look at the selected events from the life of Jacob, focusing on his dream of the stairway reaching to the heavens and wrestling of the angel with Jacob. May the Lord God bless our time in His Word. This is how the story of Jacob begins. Genesis 25 verses 20 to 21. Isaac was 40 years old when he took for himself Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean, from Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to Adonai on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Adonai answered his plea, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Genesis 25 verses 23 to 26. Adonai said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from your body will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other people, but the older will serve the younger." When her time came to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. Now the first came out reddish. All of him was like a fur coat, and they named him Esau. Afterward his brother came out with his hand holding onto Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Genesis 25 verses 28 to 33. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a stew. When Esau came in from the field, he was exhausted. So Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me some of this really red stuff because I'm exhausted." That is why he is called Edom. So Jacob said, "Sell your birthright to me today." Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die. Of whatever use is this to me, a birthright?" Jacob said, "Make a pledge to me now." So he made a pledge to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Esau was the firstborn son, and as such, he was entitled to receive a double share of the inheritance. Jacob, being the secondborn, did not have that right. However, Esau neglected his privileged position of the firstborn and, manipulated by his brother Jacob, exchanged his birthright for the plate of stew. Later in the story, we read how Jacob, following the advice of his mother Rebekah, used deception to receive the blessing from his father, which was meant for Esau. Genesis 27 verses 1 to 4. Now it was, when Isaac grew old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esau his elder son and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he said to him. "Look, I am old," he said. "I don't know the day of my death. So now, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt me some game. Then prepare me a delicious meal that I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die." Rebekah, hearing Isaac's words to Esau, advised her beloved son Jacob to pretend to be Esau and received his father's blessing. Jacob feared that his father would discover the deception, and that instead of blessing, he would bring upon himself a curse. Genesis 27 verses 12 to 15. Perhaps my father will touch me, and he will take me for a mocker, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. Then his mother said to him, Let your curse fall upon me, my son. Just listen to me and go, get them for me. So he went and got them, and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared a delicious meal that his father would love. Rebekah also took her elder son Esau's favorite clothes that were with her in the house, so she put them on her younger son Jacob. Jacob managed to deceive his father and through trickery received his father's blessing. Genesis 27 verses 26 to 29. Then his father Isaac said to him, Please come closer and kiss me, my son. So he came closer and kissed him. When he smelled the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, Behold, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that Adonai has blessed. May God give you from the dew of the sky and from the fatness of the land an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you, and may nations bow down to you. Be master over your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. Let's ask ourselves a question. Beyond its literal meaning, could this story also serve as a metaphor? Might there be a hidden typology within it? Let's consider the following. Jacob found acceptance with his father and received his blessing because he sheltered behind the name of the father's firstborn son. Jacob found acceptance with his father and received his blessing because he was clothed with the garments of the firstborn son. There is a hidden gospel of our salvation in this story. Just as Jacob was accepted by his father and received his blessing by hiding behind the name of the firstborn son and wearing his garments that carried his aroma, we, as sinners, find acceptance before God and receive his blessing when we hide under the name of his beloved firstborn son. We are clothed in his robes of righteousness, which we receive from him at our new birth from above. Let's return to our text. Genesis 27 verses 41 to 44. So Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him, and Esau said in his heart, Let the time for mourning my father draw near, so that I can kill my brother Jacob. Now to Rebekah was reported the words of Esau, her elder son. So she sent and called for Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, Look, your brother Esau is consoling himself about you with the thought of killing you. So now, my son, listen to my voice. Get up, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran. Then stay with him a few days, until your brother's rage subsides. What Rebekah thought would last few days ended up lasting at least 20 years. Here we see a sad family story where all involved were guilty. Isaac tried to undermine God's plan by blessing Esau. Esau did not honor his pledge to Jacob. Rebekah and Jacob resorted to deception to secure Isaac's blessing. Their actions resulted in hatred and separation, and Rebekah never saw Jacob again. Jacob alone did not destroy the family. Parental preferences did. Each member had to endure lonely hours of separation, disappointment, and regret. Jacob had to live without his father, mother, or brother. Yet, despite human failings, God's plan for Jacob remained unchanged. Genesis 27 verse 46. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I am disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughter of Heth, like these women, from the daughters of the land, what is life to me?" After listening to the words of his wife, Isaac blessed Jacob for a long journey. Genesis 28 verses 1 to 4. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, commanded him, and said to him, "Don't take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Get up, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take for yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. Now may El Shaddai bless you, and make you fruitful and multiply you, so that you will become an assembly of peoples. And may he give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and to your seed with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourn, which God gave to Abraham." Genesis 28 verses 10 to 12. Then Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He happened upon a certain place and spent the night there, for the sun had set. So he took one of the stones from the place and put it by his head and lay down in that place. He dreamed. All of a sudden, there was a stairway set up on the earth, and it stopped, reaching to the heavens. And behold, angels of God going up and down on it. From Beersheba, where Isaac departed, to Haran, where he was headed, was almost 800 kilometers. The text further mentions that Jacob came across a place called Bethel, which is 65 kilometers from Beersheba. In his haste to escape from Esau, Jacob must have reached Bethel by the first night. This location was not accidental. It was where Abraham had first built an altar to the Lord. Knowing that Jacob was traveling on foot and alone, we can better appreciate the mercy God showed him on the first night. God made a promise to Jacob that he would be with him and watch over him. Genesis 28 verses 13 to 15. Surprisingly, Adonai was standing on top of it, and he said, "I am Adonai, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lay, I will give it to you and to your seed. Your seed will be as the dust of the land, and you will burst forth to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed, and in your seed. Behold, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not forsake you until I have done what I promised you." It's interesting to note that in Babylon, a tower was built with the goal of reaching heaven, while here, a stairway to the heavens appeared to a person who was not looking for it. This event provides an impressive picture of a man in his natural state. Jacob was sleeping, and sleep is often used in the Bible as the symbol of death. It was in this state that God appeared to him. What did Jacob do to deserve such an high honor? What could Jacob do to deserve such a privilege? Absolutely nothing. It was the grace of God that met him for the first time and gave him and his descendants the land on which he lay. Such is the mercy of God. God chooses those who have nothing and gives them everything. God singles out those who deserve only condemnation and grants them his blessings. The stairway pointed out to Christ, who alone bridges the endless chasm that separates heaven from the earth. This stairway reached to the place where the sinner was sleeping and extended all the way to heavens. Messiah is the stairway that connects a saved person with God himself. In his address to Jacob, Adonai repeated the promises he had previously made to Abraham and Isaac, with the added assurance that he would be with Jacob, keeping him wherever he goes, and eventually bringing him back to his land. In verse 14, we read about God's promise that Jacob's offspring will be as the dust of the land. Notice interesting differences in blessing of the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Adonai said to Abraham, Genesis 22:17, I will richly bless you and bountifully multiply your seed like the stars of heaven and like the sand that is on the seashore. Adonai said to Isaac in Genesis 26:4, I will multiply your seed like the stars of the sky. Adonai said to Jacob, Genesis 28:14, your seed will be as the dust of the land. Abraham's blessing as the father of all believers encompasses both realms, heavenly sphere and the earthly sphere. Consequently, God's promise to Abraham, symbolized by the seed as numerous as the stars of the heaven and the sand of the seashore, applies to both realms. Jacob, however, represents primarily the earthly nation. Thus we find God's declaration that Jacob's seed will be as the dust of the land, distinct from the seed like the stars of the sky. The story of Jacob that follows presupposes the history of the Jewish people. Let's consider the following analogies. Even before his birth, Jacob was chosen by God, mirroring the unique status of the people of Israel. Jacob valued the blessing, but he sought it in a carnal way, completely opposite to faith. Jacob's exile from his homeland driven by sin parallels the exile of the Jewish nation after the crucifixion of their Messiah. Jacob's prolonged sojourn in the foreign land reflects the enduring faith of the Jewish people. Jacob had no altar in the land of his exile, so it is with the people of Israel. Jacob did not receive any revelation from God during all the years of his exile until God finally commanded Jacob to return to his own land. Jacob accumulated wealth in his exile and as a result incurred the enmity of his neighbors, reminiscent to the historical tension faced by the Jewish communities amidst prosperity. Upon his return, Jacob brought back the riches of the Gentiles, echoing the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral land. And at the end of his life, Jacob blessed the pagans in the person of Pharaoh and acted as God's prophet, prophesying over his children. After 2 decades of his exile, the Lord spoke to Jacob, commanding his return to his birthplace. Jacob obediently complied. Along his journey back to his homeland, a mysterious and pivotal event unfolded, the significance of which we now contemplate. Genesis 32 verses 25 to 29. So Jacob remained all by himself. Then a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not overcome him, he struck the socket of his hip. So he dislocated the socket of Jacob's hip when he wrestled with him. Then he said, Let me go, for the dawn has broken. But he said, I won't let you go unless you bless me. Then he said to him, What is your name? Jacob, he replied. Then he said, Your name will no longer be Jacob, but rather Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men, and you have overcome. This event is often explained as an example of believer's prayer, but such interpretation is incorrect. Jacob remained all by himself. In this statement, we have the first key to understanding the event we are considering. Being alone with God is the only way to know yourself. Regardless of what we think of ourselves or what people think of us, the only question is what God thinks of us. And the answer to this question can only be learned when we are alone with God. A man wrestled with him. Note that it is not written that Jacob wrestled with man, but a man wrestled with Jacob. Jacob was not wrestling with a man to obtain blessing. Instead, a man was wrestling with Jacob in order to bring Jacob to despair and weakness, so that Jacob would realize what a helpless and worthless creature he is. The man was the angel of Adonai. The words of Jacob are, "For I have seen God face to face, and my life has been spared." A man wrestled with him until the break of dawn points to the long suffering of God. When a man saw that he had not overcome Jacob, he struck the socket of his hip, so he dislocated the socket of Jacob's hip. This illustrates how swiftly God could put an end to Jacob's resistance and render him helpless. All it took for a man to dislocate Jacob's hip joint was to touch it. This is the second key to understanding this event. Jacob could no longer rely on his own strength. The third key to understanding this event is Jacob's words to the man, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." In these words, we see that the man's goal has been achieved. Jacob could no longer wrestle with God. All Jacob could do was hold on to him. This marked the beginning of the new era in Jacob's life. Until this point, Jacob had lived by his own strength and wisdom, but now he sought blessing not through deception, but through his weakness. Then he said to him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he said. Then he said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but rather Israel." The question about Jacob's name was a reproach to him. Jacob is translated as the heel holder or a supplanter. But how is the word Israel translated? The new name Israel consists of two words. The last word is El, which means God. There are almost 100 biblical names that end on El. In these names, the first word is typically a verb. For example, Daniel means God judges. Ezekiel means God strengthens. And Israel means God prevails, God rules, God contends. Then he said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but rather Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and you have overcome." Jacob fought with his brother for the rights of the firstborn and succeeded. Jacob fought for his father's blessing and received it. Jacob competed with Laban and outmaneuvered him. Now the angel of the Lord himself has been wrestling with Jacob. And as a result, God changed Jacob's name to Israel to teach him the essential lesson of dependence on God. To learn this lesson, Jacob was first humbled by God. The new name Israel was given to Jacob so that he would not forget that from that moment on, his life should rely on God's guidance. Genesis 35 verses 9 to 12. God appeared to Jacob again after he returned from Paddan Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, "Your name was Jacob. No longer will your name be Jacob, for your name will be Israel." So he named him Israel. God also said to him, "I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and an assembly of nations will come from you. From your loins will come forth kings. The land that I gave to Abraham and to Isaac, I give it to you, and to your seed after you will I give the land." In conclusion, let's reflect on the biblical phrase regarding our God. It is written in the Bible that He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But why is not it Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, considering Jacob was renamed by God? This is because Jacob serves as a prototype of the people of Israel. Even to this day, the people of Israel continue to live lives reminiscent of Jacob's. Our patient God continues to contend with his people. This concludes our study. Let us grow in grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Until next time.